to order. This is the hearing of the Subcommittee on Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations. Today, we will examine the ever-worsening exploitation of vulnerable persons by human traffickers and discuss U.S. efforts to combat this heinous crime. This is the 41st congressional hearing that I've chaired on human trafficking, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all of our truly remarkable witnesses, leaders who have made the difference, especially our survivors who have not only come forward to tell the world, but to tell other victims that there is hope, that there is life after this unbelievable cruelty, and you are just amazing, and I thank you for being here. I also thank that we have the administration here today, especially our Ambassador at Large for Trafficking in Persons, Cindy Dyer. Thank you for being here as well. You know, more than 20 years ago, Congress approved and the President signed historic legislation that I authored, known as the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. This bipartisan landmark law created a comprehensive whole-of-government initiative to combat sex and labor trafficking in the United States and around the world. It also established dozens and dozens of new programs to protect victims, prosecute traffickers, and prevent human trafficking in the first place, the 3 Ps. Looking at the progress made over the years, it's hard to believe that the Trafficking Victims Protection Act was met with serious opposition, a wall of opposition, if you will, dismissed by many as a solution in search of a problem. And that goes for the media, many of who just dismissed this and thought we were exaggerating when we were talking about the prevalence of this crime, not only around the world, but right here in the United States. Most people at the time associated trafficking with drugs and weapons, not human beings. Reports of vulnerable persons, especially women and children, being reduced to commodities for sale were often met with surprise, incredulity, or indifference. Top administration officials even testified against major provisions, including, right here in this room, including sanctions and even the need to create the Trafficking in Persons Tip Office, arguing that exposing and sanctioning countries with egregiously poor records on human trafficking would be, quote, counterproductive. The point was just put some more enhanced reporting into the country reports and human rights practices and call it a day. They did support, however, increasing the penalties for traffickers, and that was a good thing, so we had solidarity on that. They also liked the interagency coordination. They already had one. Our law expanded it and made it statutory. But again, the tip office wouldn't have existed, and I think it is, you know, there was talk, and we found this when we did the International Religious Freedom Act, that somehow we would be creating a hierarchy of human rights rather than value added. You know, all human rights abuses need to be confronted and fought. But, you know, this one is so egregious and so pervasive. We weren't doing enough at the time, and we would not be a Tier 1 country back then. We would have been a Tier 3 country. And thankfully, that's all of that has changed. As a matter of fact, when our bill was stalled and languishing and presumed dead, and I can't tell you how many times I was told it wasn't going anywhere, especially in the Senate, I invited victims of sex trafficking to inform and to motivate. And I sat at hearings just like this and made their case, often through tears. They made clear that delay was denial and that we can't do this fast enough. We have to do it right, but it has to be done as quickly as possible. It took over 2 years to muster the votes for passage, and my bill was finally signed into law on October 28th, the year 2000. Within a year after enactment, no one was arguing anymore that the Trafficking Victims Protection Act's integrated 3P strategy, prevention, protection for victims, and prosecution of the traffickers was flawed or unworkable, unnecessary, or counterproductive. And remember, the pushback was with administrations was bipartisan too. I'll never forget, after the bill passed, we went now to the Bush administration and said, please implement. 1 month went by, another month went by, another month went by, and they weren't doing it. So finally, I asked Henry Hyde, I was vice chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I asked him if we could do a hearing demanding that they get this up and running. He said, okay. We set a date, and the administration got back to us in that case and said, give us a month. So we gave them a month, and they still didn't do much. They even said, you could come over and cut the ribbon. I said, I don't want to cut the ribbon. It's all about getting this up and running. And probably the biggest laggard in all of it was the T visa, which took so long to get in force. So there's been bipartisan foot dragging with administrations, then it needs to be underscored. That's just not acceptable. The bill included, as I think all of you know, a number of sea change criminal code reforms, including treating as a victim of trafficking and not a perpetrator of a crime anyone who's recruited, harbored, transported, or obtained for the purpose of a commercial sex act or for labor services, because we were just talking to Ms. Vandenberg. You know, right from the beginning, there was that twin, you know, no diminution of how important forced labor is, and slave labor, if you will. Both trafficking offenses need to be confronted, and aggressively so, and she always has made that point so eloquently. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act radically reformed the way the U.S. responded to human trafficking, and it has pushed states, because we had an admonishment to states with justice, to say, pass your own laws. We need more prosecutors, more eyes and ears to take this. Everything can't be done at the federal level with the U.S. attorneys. We need, and thankfully every state, including my own, has a tremendous statute in hand. And, you know, as long as we got good prosecutorial discretion, say this is a priority, it will make a difference, and it is making a difference. Thanks to the act, thousands of human traffickers have been prosecuted and jailed. Jeffrey Epstein was being prosecuted pursuant to the TVPA. He never got, obviously, to the point where the trial took place, but the indicting charges were all TPVA. Most countries in the world have responded to this gross violation of human rights and have enacted anti-trafficking legislation. Yet there is more that must be done to strengthen the U.S. and international response to these crimes, as more than 27 million people are still, and the estimates vary, but are still being trafficked today. I've also authored 4 additional laws to combat human trafficking, including the TVPA reauthorizations in 2003 and 2005. When we first did the bill, we could not get buy-in for an ambassador at large. We got that in the 03 reauthorization. And, you know, that not only raises the status and stature and gravitas of Ms. Dyer now, Ambassador Dyer, but all the other previous leaders, not just in the building at the State Department, but of course everywhere they go. I mean, Ambassador at Large is you know, a very, very high position, and we couldn't get that until 2003. We also put in 2003 a language that said when supply chains, and this went to the labor trafficking issue, the CEOs or CFOs have to sign saying clearly that they understand that if they're complicit in trafficking, they lose the contract. Hopefully they'll be criminally prosecuted as well, but they lose the contract. And that has made a difference. Nothing's perfect, but it has made a difference. In 2016, after 8 years, 3 times passed in the House, International Megan's Law became law. Now, why is that important? We know that child sex tourism is rampant. Men mostly go on these child sex tourism trips all over the world, to Bangkok, to South America, to Brazil, Mexico, and they rent a child, which is disgusting beyond words, and abuse that child. And we know it's happening. Well, International Megan's Law, as you all know, and Megan Kanka, the little girl, lived in my district in Hamilton Township, in our hometown. And I got to know the parents very well. Megan's parents, she was killed in 1994 by a cruel pedophile who lived across the street. Nobody knew of his background, and he lured her in and killed her horribly, and then even had the audacity to go out and hand down pamphlets. Do you know where Megan is? Help us find Megan. He's the one who killed her. He's still in prison today. But it led to Megan's Law in all of our states, the District of Columbia and everywhere else, Puerto Rico. But we found that what happens, these pedophiles, when they're out, go get passports, they travel, and they did it with impunity and with secrecy. The bill passed 3 times in the House, could not get any movement in the Senate. We finally did, became law. And Angel Watch, the Angel Watch program is doing a tremendous job of noticing countries of destination of that pedophile who's traveling, or pedophiles, they often do it in groups. And there have been over 2,000 notifications. About half have led to the country saying, you're not coming in. And you know where the idea came from? I was meeting, like Ambassador Dyer does, with all the delegations when they come in to talk about what they're doing to try to combat human trafficking. So I met with the Thai delegation. And I said, it popped in my head, if you knew a convicted pedophile was coming to Bangkok or to Phuket or some of these other places, what would you do? They said, we wouldn't let him in. That now he started drafting the bill. 8 years later, it became law, and it has, I think, made a difference. I'm happy to say that all of this has been bipartisan. Karen Bass and I wrote the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Act. We worked with the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass, and put a big emphasis on some of the prevention pieces, like making sure that our children are situationally aware, K through 12, as to what it looks like, what to be on the guard for. And if you see a friend who may be being enticed or with drugs or something, that you immediately get to that principal, to your teacher, and to train them as well. And HHS and the TIP office and others all have very good curricula on how to. And I would hope anyone hearing this hearing in a school would look to say, let's have an anti-human trafficking couple of days and really bring in someone who's a survivor who can really sensitize these young people, these students, and that will make a difference as well. So I do believe this is a pivotal time to be focused on human trafficking as U.S. faces a crisis at our southern border that has resulted in countless victims, especially women and children, being exploited, while traffickers take advantage of the chaos. With the expiration of Title 42 last night, I think it's now more important than ever that we examine what can and must be done to stop this crime and rescue and tangibly assist these victims. I talked to one president, this was of Guatemala, and he suggested to me that about 80% of these young women making their way up to the border and into the United States are sexually assaulted somewhere along the line, and we don't know how many then, particularly the unaccompanied minors. The New York Times put that number at about like 85,000, and we don't know where they are. That they are just easy prey for these predators. So we got to do so much more. Let me just say briefly, and then I'll conclude on this. In 2015, I chaired a congressional hearing to demand accuracy and accountability when designating tier rankings pursuant to the TIP report. Egregious violators, 14 countries in all, and it was Reuters that broke this story. We thought there was a problem, but then Reuters interviewed anonymously a number of people at TIP who had made strong recommendations that China, Cuba, Malaysia, Oman, 14 countries in all, be tier 3. And when it went up the chain at the State Department, for other reasons, disconnected from trafficking, all of a sudden they got passing grades. And I said at the time, and then I did 3 hearings within a space of 2 years. One of them was called Get It Right This Time, a victim-centered trafficking in persons report. And you know, the point is that the credibility of the report itself is, you know, that's one of the mainstays of the TVPA and all of our efforts. Of course, all the other programs are important as well. It rests on accuracy. So the TIP report gets it accurate, but then, you know, when countries look at this, I remember even Thailand being upset that Malaysia was getting a passing grade, even though on forced labor, they had horrible things that were happening, and even the European Union, I believe it was, gave them a red card, as they called it, because it was so bad. We must get the report right. No fudging, no favors to nations based on other agendas. Friends don't let friends commit human rights abuses. If our best friends in the world are doing it, we hold them to account. If we're doing it, we hold us to account. It's all about the victims. Grade inflation for certain favored countries undermines the credibility, and I believe it really demoralizes the victims and anti-human trafficking advocates, as well as countries trying to improve their record. In the coming days, I plan on reintroducing the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Act, which has been significantly informed by survivor input and includes a survivor empowerment approach to victim services. The bill will strengthen and expand U.S. anti-trafficking programs, including ramping up prevention and protection efforts against the trafficking of children. I look forward to working with my colleagues on this. And again, I thank you for being here, and I'd like to now yield to my good friend and colleague, Ms. Wild, our ranking member, for any opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate your willingness, Mr. Chair, to call this really important hearing today. Let me begin by addressing the extraordinary witnesses who are here today. Thank you all for your steadfast dedication to taking on the horrific scourge of human trafficking. Several of the witnesses here are themselves survivors of trafficking. By dedicating your lives to ensuring that others do not experience the inhumanity that you did, you exemplify the forces of solidarity that reflect the human spirit at its very best and most courageous. As members of this committee and this subcommittee, Democrats and Republicans alike, we are very united on this issue. And while we have made substantial progress, much of it outlined by the chairman in his opening remarks, all of us here know that an enormous amount of work remains to be done. Every aspect of this crisis demands ever more interconnected efforts by our government in lockstep with governments across the international community and through international organizations, which is also part of this subcommittee's work. We are the Subcommittee on Global Health, Human Rights, and International Organizations. So this is a topic that is squarely in front of our subcommittee. But the trafficking of children, sex trafficking, men, women, and children denied their most basic human rights and forced into systems of modern slavery, which almost seems like an oxymoron to me. That's what we are here to address and what we must continue to address. And it's all too easy for so many of us to forget that this exists throughout the world. And for many, it's something that if we do think about it, it's too easy to compartmentalize and not think about it because it's such a terribly difficult subject to think about. But that is what we are here to do. We are called upon to do it. I am honored to be part of this subcommittee and to work on this issue with the chairman and with the other members of this subcommittee. Our objective is clear. We have to build a future of dignity for all, a future where no human being is ever confronted with these practices, which are an affront to our common humanity. And this transcends not only party lines, but religious boundaries, philosophical boundaries, cultural differences, whatever. This is an issue that is unacceptable to no person who considers themselves to be a moral and humane being. And so we've got to work on this. I really look forward to hearing the powerful testimony of all of you, and I look forward to working with each of you, with Chairman Smith and with our colleagues, to bring about the progress that so many people around the world so urgently need. I truly hope that in a matter of years there won't be a need for this kind of hearing, and I'm going to try to be my eternally optimistic self and believe that we will actually get something done on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Ranking Member Wild, for your excellent opening statement. I'd like to now ask Ms. Radewagen if she has any opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. I don't.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to now yield to Dr. McCormick. If he has any opening comments.
There's different kinds of courage. I've been around a lot of Marines, a lot of Navy guys, a lot of sailors, and a lot of Army soldiers, and they have a certain kind of courage. But I think in many ways it pales to the kind of courage of those people who are victims who actually come out of something so horrible and actually appear before a very public community and become vulnerable to save others. I applaud you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. As a youth minister for 20 years, you see some great things and you see some horrible things. And I really cannot say how bought in I'm to solving this to our best of our ability. It is a bipartisan issue. It is something that all Americans should be bought into. Hopefully we try to stay away from the politics of it and just the human nature, embrace the human nature aspect of this, because it is something purely evil, that we could all agree that there is nothing other than to defeat this is our only point. So thank you. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being brave, courageous, for standing up for not just yourself, but everybody else who goes through these things now and into the future. This fight will never be done. We'll never be done making it better. And we have a long road ahead of us. We've seen in Georgia, one of the worst places for child trafficking. We've made some good strides, I think. The governor has addressed this in big ways, and I think it has huge support from all aspects of the political spectrum as well as the private industry, because quite frankly, the government can't solve this by itself. And anybody who thinks that the government's going to solve this by itself doesn't understand what a massive problem this is. This is a heart problem. This is a spiritual problem. It's a humanity problem. People have turned away from what's good and embraced what's evil to a large extent. And so we have to be equally courageous on what is good and courageous and spiritual to defeat this. So I continue to pray on this. I continue to work on this. And after this hearing, don't think that there's ever a day that will go by where you can't reach out to any of us and continue this fight aside from a hearing, because this is just the beginning. Thank you.